Which faction had the best shuttle? Welcome to today's video. We're returning to a format that honestly I've deviated from for a while. Not because I don't like doing these type of videos, I actually do. There's just not been anything I've wanted to cover. So if you enjoy this type of content, give me some of your ideas down below and maybe I'll do some more. So you heard me right. Today we'll be looking at the shuttles of 4 Star Wars factions. The Lambda shuttle of the Empire, probably the most famous shuttle in Star Wars history. The Nu Shuttle of the Republic. The Steathipede of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, and the Upsilon shuttle of the First Order. And we'll be comparing how well these ships can do their primary function, shuttling VIPs across the galaxy. Let's start with the Lambda, and it's a very interesting ship. Yes, a shuttle, but also a bit of a hybrid transport, able to carry cargo or up to 20 stormtroopers. This was a pretty large ship and had not just a pilot, but an entire crew of 6, including a navigator, a gunner, a communications officer, and an engineer for power distribution. Not to show my cards too early, but the Empire really went all out when it comes to the technology of this craft. It had a very fast Class 1 hyperdrive, what the New Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels calls one of the most formidable deflector shields in the Imperial fleet, a heavily reinforced hull, and enough weapons that the ship often flew without an escort. The Lambda was typically armed with 2 forward-facing cannons and a retractable rear cannon, and we've actually seen multiple times that this ship can put up a real fight. If you've ever played Rogue Squadron, you know how dangerous Moff Searden was in his Lambda. Azani Isard similarly put up quite a chase in her shuttle, and we see how powerful the vessel is in Aftermath. The combination of the incredibly strong shields and armor plus the rear-facing gun meant that the Lambda could be a real threat to fighters. Even without maneuverability, it can survive long enough to punch back. Lambdas were also made to be upgraded and configurable depending on just how the transporting VIP was. Certain versions had even better shielding and more weapons, while others had cloaking and other experimental features. Alright, next up we'll go back in time and talk about the Republic. Initially I actually recorded an entire analysis of the Edda class, but the fact that it's sort of a direct precursor to the Lambda kind of makes that discussion less interesting. For those who want to know more about the ship though, the sourcebook Endless Vigil has a good breakdown. Interestingly, whereas the Edda is a pre-Clone Wars ship meant for ambassadors, not really focused on warfare and combat, whereas the Nu class is honestly a bit closer to a gunship. And remember, I'll be evaluating these ships on how well they perform as shuttles, not anything else. The Clone Wars campaign guide gives a nice breakdown of the ship and explains that it was designed to supplement but not replace the LAT transport, with the main distinction being that this is better for long-range missions. You can launch from a planet in a Nu class, get there pretty quickly, and deliver troops while being protected by heavy armor, whereas the LAT was more of a hot drop transport, usually launched from capital ships. Like the Lambda, the Nu worked as both a troop transport, but often as a shuttle for high-ranking Republic or Jedi figures, and according to StarWars.com, it has 6 laser cannons, which, yeah, you can clearly see. It's got 2 forward-facing near the wing joints on each side, then a really nice set of ball-mounted swivel cannons on each side of the nose. Definitely an impressive ship that saw a lot of action, even in really high stakes. Alright, so next up we have the Confederacy of Independent Systems and the Steathipede class. And I don't know why I just hate saying that name. I see the word and I want to say stealth. But anyway, this ship actually appears all the way back in the Phantom Menace. The lore for it was actually established in the Visual Dictionary, probably one of my favorite Star Wars books as a kid, and hasn't changed a whole lot. In that book, it's simply called the Nemoidian Shuttle, and we get, and I quote, recalling the body shapes of giant domesticated beetles on Nemoidia, the Nemoidian shuttle conveys trade officers from orbiting freighters to planet surfaces and the hangars of other vessels. The pointed landing claws are only effective on hard surfaces because Nemoidians are not interested in landing on bare fields. Other notes include the fact that the ship is generally designed for comfort, and comfort for a small amount of passengers versus the prior 2 shuttles, but that it still contained heavy deflector shield gear. What's really interesting about the Steathipede is how many different variants we see throughout the Clone Wars and beyond. There's a larger version, several different designs, and interestingly, even the standard Steathipede started to get upgraded throughout the Clone Wars. We see, for example, that typically, if it were being used to transport high-ranking officials within the Separatist forces, they would at the very least add guns, and probably the most famous Steathipede is the Phantom II, the auxiliary dropship on the Ghost, which had a set of rear and forward-facing facing cannons. It could work as a turret or actually join the fight. Not much else to say, but this one was pretty maneuverable, and I like how customizable it obviously is. I do, however, feel that it does have a lot of wasted space, especially because the base model is meant to be quite luxurious. Alright, next up we have the Upsilon class command shuttle, and I gotta say, I'm critical of a lot of the ship design choices in the sequel trilogy, but I love this one. It might be my favorite shuttle design in Star Wars. It's also probably the ship that gets the most screen time on this list, at least within the movies, but its specific lore largely comes from the Force Awakens cross-section. In that book, we learn that the Upsilon was created by servants of the Empire who fled to the unknown regions, which is not surprising. That's basically how everything from the First Order was created, but it implies the fact that, again, as with most First Order technology, it was created with really advanced next-gen systems. The complete vehicles guide and the incredible cross-sections both basically say the exact same thing, huge shocker there, and that is that these command shuttles really tried to take protection to the next level, focusing not only on shielding, but also the most advanced sensors possible. You don't need shields if you can find and avoid your enemy before they find you. The wings on the Upsilon are actually where a lot of this technology is stored, and they're very heavily armored, which is good because otherwise they'd be considered somewhat of a weak point, to put it lightly. And that's why they spread out during flight. I mean, you don't need to extend wings in space, otherwise it's meant to increase the max sensor range. I really like that feature, actually. I think it makes a lot of sense. Additionally, it did have advanced countermeasure systems. Weapon-wise, we do see two very heavy cannons facing forward. With that being said, let's rank the ships from best to worst. Coming in at number 1, my favorite, I think the best shuttle, the OG, the Lambda-class. This thing is sturdy, it's got incredible defenses, it's got that really fast Class 1 hyperdrive, and I think it does a better job weapon-wise when considering the purpose of the shuttle. Coming in at number 2 is the Upsilon class. I really like this thing's focus on defending itself in other ways, avoiding fights. It just makes a lot of sense to me. From there, we have the Republic at 3 and the CIS at number 4. Honestly, I think the CIS ship is somewhat hampered by the fact that it started its life as a pleasure craft, or at least a business craft, whereas these other vehicles were all purpose-built for warfare. I do find it interesting how different but similar the Lambda and the Upsilon are in some ways. The Lambda was frequently used as a troop lander, the First Order command shuttle, not so much. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours and your rankings down below.